for the night, who is Paul Rusconi. Go ahead and wave your hand, Paul. Yeah, there he is. Paul is a Los Angeles-based artist, raised in California and had studied at Pepperdine University. Paul became most well known early on for his portrait series, which I have up here. One of up here on the screen. We'll talk about in a second. But he's known for painting with nail polish and painting onto plexiglass. So we're going to talk about his portrait series and a few of his other series in a little bit. So I'm not going to go into depth about that because we're going to talk about it here soon. But he has his collections up in numerous institutions and private collections as well, including but not limited to the Frederick R. Weisman Art Foundation, the Castilla Foundation, Batonga Foundation, Jummix Foundation, Carnegie Art Museum, and our very own Abrams Engel Institute for the Visual Arts, AEIVA, here at UAB. And that is this particular piece here entitled Bill, which is nail polish on plexiglass. And so without further ado, I am going to stop talking and let Paul say a few things. And first off, I hope everybody has whatever they're working on. If you want to hold it up to the screen so we can all kind of see what you're working on. If you're working on one of Paul's creations or something else, yay! And so this is something a little different than what we normally do. These are templates. And so Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about if you're working on one of these, what these are and kind of where we should go with them.
Great. So these templates are templates of reduced or in a reductive state, the expansion paintings that I've done. And the expansion paintings are all portraits, actually. And the idea behind this imagery is that if a person can be thought of as an assemblage of all of their parts and pieces, including thoughts, emotions, desires, actions, ideas, and if those things can be colorized, how would the color be applied and in what way? And so these kind of start as organic drawings, and they emanate from the center, and I will take color, so whatever medium I'm using, primarily nail polish, but tonight, and along with a series of drawings I've been working on, are colored pencils. So I start from the center and then emanate outwards. And as they've progressed, some have turned into florals and have aspects that are reminiscent of other things for sure, but to me, they're all considered portraits.
Awesome. I really love this, and I'm going to just do I know he's not on here, but a quick shout out to my father. It's his birthday today, so that's who I'm thinking about as I color mine. So, yeah. But yeah, let's go ahead and get talking about your art. So, I know, do we want to start with the expansion paintings and maybe work our way backwards, or do we want to start with portraits? Okay.
We can definitely start with the portrait since you have Bill up on the screen.
All right.
My interest in portraiture goes back, long before I started painting. But when I started painting, portraiture was kind of at the top of my list. The work started out by image appropriation, and I would steal images from magazines and newspapers and whatever was out and circulating in the media. And I would pick a subject and extract an image and work with the image on copiers, Xerox machines, fax machines, break down the image in a way that I wanted, and then I would use industrial signing to print those images on plexiglass. And it wasn't long before I was really interested in creating the portrait by hand from images that I took of the subjects. So Bill Viola is a perfect example. I'm sorry, you guys, I keep batting these very aggressive flies that have decided to bombard me during this interview, this art talk. But Bill is a friend of mine, and he's the godfather of video art, and I think he's an exceptional artist, and he's an exceptional human being. And I approached him and I said, I'd love to do his portrait, and which would entail my getting a photograph and working from a photograph. So, again, my interest is I'm using tools that are current and part of what we're experiencing now in this age. And part of that is products like plexiglass, which is a relatively new medium, and nail enamel in the way that we know it, which is a relatively new medium. And combining those things and using what's available to an artist now, and breaking Bill down in dots. I'm looking at and thinking about the computer and how important the computer is to me personally, and its influence on me. And I liken it to the Impressionists using the camera upon its invention. So now we have the computer, and how am I going to use that in the work in a very organic way? So taking someone's portrait, someone's image, and attempting to get their likeness is obviously paramount and very important. But what supersedes that for me is getting someone's essence, and doing that with a dot is important, and referencing the computer is important, and taking a digital image and then breaking that image down and then reproducing it with nail enamel by hand.
I absolutely, this is one of our favorite pieces in our collection, and it's always the one that gets a lot of attention because they come in and they think that, so it harkens a little bit to the Ben Day dots of Roy Lichtenstein, but the thing is yours are handmade, and they're also not all uniform as well. John, is it okay for me to unshare my screen and you share the picture that you have,
sure,
so we can look at it?
Sure.
I've always found when I bring students or visitors into our collections, we have these hanging right at eye level, so people are just astounded by the fact that like you do this by hand. And so I was wondering, as John is pulling his up, you could tell us a little bit about the process in making them.
Yeah, sure. So the process starts with an idea or a concept, and a lot of people have, a lot of gallerists, a lot of dealers like to really label artists, and people have called me a pop artist in the past, which I will gladly take. They can call me anything they want, but I consider myself a conceptualist, and it starts with an idea, and the object is just a formal representation of the concept. So it starts with that for me, and then generally I'll do a little drawing, and like let's use Bill Viola for instance, and I knew that I wanted to get his portrait. So I told him I need about 10 or 15 minutes with him, and I'll bring my my phone or my digital camera, and I'll get a shot, and then I take that image, and then I use a computer to break it down because I'm interested in looking at organic material, whether it be a tree, a person, a bird, and looking at it through the lens of a computer, because everything that we see this whole meeting, we're looking at pixelated images that we then combine. So how can I recreate a pixelated image and then combine all of those dots, which at the core of this and the core of my practice, I think all life is connected. And it's really hard to see that in the micro. And you really need to step away from that and get a macro vision of all life and how all life is connected. And the dot is a metaphor for that because the paintings all start with one dot and they build out. And I'm using the size of a dot to create light and shadow. So like you said, unlike Lichtenstein with the Binde dot, which are all uniform in size, these are all different and all varied, and they're all done by hand. And so I'm trying to create convex and concave shapes using a dot to represent light, either light or shadow, whether it's being painted in the positive or in the negative. So I find that using a computer, using a dot, really helps me to reference all the things that are in my mind as a conceptualist. And these formal objects really help represent everything that those ideas mean for me. And Bill's just a great example of that. And I, he's such a, I was really happy with this painting because, like I said, likeness is something, but essence is really what I'm after. And anyone that knows this guy, looking at this, they tend to really feel him. So that's the highest compliment.
Can I jump in with just a couple of comments?
Yeah.
I think one thing, Paul, that you don't get from looking at it here, even though we can zoom in really close, is the sort of scale of this piece. Like, I don't, when you see it in person, what's the height? It's like 6 feet-ish, right?
A little less.
Like, so like maybe 5 to 6 feet versus, like whatever the width of that would be. But then also just like, even though it might be subconscious, like the fact that it's on this plexiglass, this piece weighs a ton, and it has a real sort of like weight to it, like a real heft. And I know you referred to Bill as the godfather of video art, which is high praise, but also equally like almost an understatement. Like he is maybe the most significant video artist of all time. But I also don't recall seeing that many portraits of him. I would love to know about how did your relationship with him begin? Like, how did you get him to sit? How did it end with him sitting for this portrait?
Honestly, it was a simple phone call to him. I just said, "Listen, I'd love to do your portrait." He was familiar with what I do and how I do it, so he agreed graciously. I'm always surprised, and I feel like I do the portraits that are meant to be done by me. I reached out to Chuck Close, who I've had an acquaintanceship with for many, many years. And, I asked his art dealer, and I wanted to do a portrait of Chuck, and, immediately the answer was no from him. He said, Chuck doesn't really allow people to do his portraits. Chuck does people's portraits.
Right.
So, there is the opportunity to become intimidated, but I think that if you have a feeling, and I think this applies to anything in life, anyone has a feeling about anything, they feel strongly, they feel passionate about it, go for it, no matter what, no matter how many times you're told no, you just go.
Yeah.
So Chuck immediately, said yes, and I went out, and he was just, again, the word gracious comes to mind. He was so gracious, and it was just a real honor, and I love doing people's portraits. I think it's brings me so much joy.
Do you remember how this particular piece ended up being the one that we acquired for our collection? You were in a show in Montgomery, Alabama, of all places.
Correct.
And
of all places.
That's the night I met you, and my wife and I drove down and we saw the show, and we walked into the gallery, and she immediately said, "Hey, that's a painting of Bill Viola." And like that is the painting that we just like latched onto immediately. We had this wonderful conversation about it, and then like a few months later, when you ended up having your AEIVA show, and it became apparent that we could maybe get one of these for our collection, like that just one felt like the natural fit.
It meant so much to me that you guys felt so strongly about it, and I feel like the paintings go where they need to go, and there is definitely, no matter what, an emotional pull for people towards different paintings, whether it be subject, whether it be color, whether it be composition, whatever draws you to that object. And it was you, and it was Lisa, and it was a couple other people. There were some, I think there was a couple docents that were present from the museum, etc. And all y'all, I'm going to say that because you're in Alabama right now, were drawn towards this painting. And I was like, all right, well, we got to do whatever we got to do to make sure that this museum has what it wants, because this clearly is the pick.
That was a really good y'all, by the way.
Hey, Christina and Paul, we have a couple questions in the chat. You want to go ahead and ask them?
Let's do it.
So our first question is, Paul, do you use regular store-bought nail polish, and how many bottles does a single work usually take?
So I use every brand of nail polish that I've come across. Actually, that is 100% accurate. There's never been a nail polish that I have ignored or not tried if it's in front of me. So it ranges from really high-end, very expensive polishes like Chanel to Sally Hansen to Revlon, OPI, you name it, I use it. And I will go through hundreds and hundreds of bottles per painting. The 12-foot painting I'm working on now is in 3 panels, and each panel has 2 layers of plexiglass, and each layer of plexiglass has several colors. So, and the surface is really dense and thick with nail enamel. So that takes hundreds of bottles. I can walk you through the garage a little later if you want, but in the back right, on some racks, I've got nail polish that I'm getting ready to do another painting, and there's probably 1,500 bottles there that I'll go through.
Wow.
So it's a lot of enamel.
And then you kind of answered this. Do you have a preference for regular nail polish or the new gel? But it sounds like you use everything.
I use everything, and a lot of the new gels require a 2 or 3 step process. So I tend to stay away from that unless I test it and it dries in a way that the nail enamel can bond to the plex like the regular nail polish.
Great. And then the last question so far, is the perceived drop shadow a result of the thickness of the plexiglass or an actual shadow from the enamel?
And I think that was in reference to the Bill painting.
So in reference to Bill, that is the actual shadow created by the dot. In other paintings, like the Chuck Close and Agnes Martin on the screen now, those paintings, there is a substrate and there is a facade, and so I will paint on the substrate and I'll paint on the facade. So it has kind of a dual effect. There will be a shadow, but there is an artificial kind of fabricated drop shadow, if you will, at times also.
John, can you go back to the Agnes and the Chuck paintings that you just had up? Yeah. So for those, I remember we talked about this when you were here last. Those, and I think you referenced it just a minute ago, those have multiple sheets of plexi in them, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, because I distinctly remember those were much heavier than Bill's. Well, deceptively.
It's interesting because they all have 2 sheets of plexiglass, but not all paintings have both sheets painted on with nail enamel. And the substrate will have spray paint painted on that, oftentimes nail enamel as well, but the difference in the weight is actually the hundreds of bottles of nail enamel that can go on that 1 sheet of plex. So it does, the nail polish on the plexiglass does increase the weight substantially.
You have any idea like how much weight that adds?
I've been afraid to weigh them.
I mean, aside from it being one of our favorite pieces in the collection, it's also one of the most difficult pieces we have to install because it's so heavy, and getting those 2 frames to line up perfectly like and flush at the top. They're outrageously heavy, Paul.
They are. They are. You need a strong wall, and they're put up with cleats, as you know, but they are really heavy. It took a lot of engineering actually to figure out how big I could go on a standard wall, given a cleat and drywall. So, but believe it or not, we did a lot of tests, and they've been engineered pretty extensively so that each panel can actually stay up. And in California, we're always concerned about earthquakes, so everyone tries to, earthquake-proof things. But knock on wood, so far, so good.
No, and I joke about the weight, but even subconsciously, like if you're not actually, you can't pick up the work in the gallery, obviously, but they have a substantial like heft to them. It's really nice, actually.
We have one more question from the chat, talking about the heaviness of these pieces. Given they are so heavy, are there any special considerations for collectors mounting in the home?
No, they're all engineered to hang on standard drywall. So each picture comes with a cleat on the back. If a particular panel is extremely heavy, there'll be 2 cleats per panel, so that the painting's weight's distributed among 16 screws. So the weight that one screw can hold is calculated, and I think we have taken precautions so that it's less than, or it is half of what it can actually accommodate.
And then I think
One more. Sorry, I've got lots of questions for you, Paul. We're fascinated.
I love questions.
So Samantha asked, do you paint with the brush that comes with the bottle of nail polish or use other brushes?
These are all great questions. I paint with a nail polish brush. And the simple reason is, A, it's a great size, and B, I can't afford to go through the thousands of brushes that I would have to buy to use nail polish. Nail polish, as everyone knows, is very gummy, and it is it'll dry very, very quickly. So the reason that nail polishes have these little necks on them is because as you let the brush enter the bottle and dip into the liquid, it comes out with as little oxygen exposure as possible. And it keeps your nail polish fresh so that, someone can use it multiple times. Where I go through a bottle, I can go through a bottle within seconds, because I'll brush areas on the outlines of the line, and then I'll pour the bottle into the bigger part of the line to keep it going and keep it flowing. And I have to do each section relatively fast. If I don't, the nail polish will dry, and then you'll get bumps and ridges where the new nail polish would meet the dry nail polish. So to keep everything smooth, you've got to really kind of get into a groove and a flow and figure out how you can maximize your pour and that laying down of that particular ring.
Then we have another question from Lisa, who says that your work is amazing, and do people ever ask you if you can do commissioned portraits?
Great question. Yes, people ask. I've never really been open to it, only because for me, it has to be so organic. The portrait has to be so organic, and I'm spending so much time, energy, and effort that I'll never do as many portraits as I want to do in my lifetime. There's just simply not enough time. And there's something about commissions where I feel like there's an inherent level of disappointment. And no matter what, if someone has something, an idea in their mind, if they are looking at Bill Viola and say, oh, I want my portrait like that portrait is very specific to that person. So someone's portrait's going to be very different. And I think unless someone is extremely open and amenable to being interpreted, which is really scary for a lot of people, it probably wouldn't be a great match, and I probably wouldn't meet their expectation. They'd probably be sorely disappointed.
I understand that. So let me go on to, John stopped sharing his screen, so I've shared mine. So what then, so in the show at AEIVA, I think if I'm remembering correctly, those were all artists that you had taken portraits of. What draws you to some of these other portraits that you have for us on this slideshow?
What's on the screen is an early painting that I was talking about, where I would take an image from popular culture, magazines, newspapers, etc. This one in particular is of Lindsay Lohan. I think I did this in 2007. And I was really interested in taking the overexposed and rather mundane and banal, and taking an image, and for me, recognizing beauty in a particular scene or individual or experience that that person was going through, extracting that and turning it into something that I considered art. And I think this is a mugshot for Lindsay Lohan. And I just thought, you know, I started cropping in on it and looking at it, and I thought, God, there's so much beauty in this. And there's so much to be said about, you know, that kind of blank stare. And I'm really, really attracted to ambiguity. And so I love ambiguity in imagery. And you don't know exactly what someone's thinking. At the same time, you can really interpret and paint your own picture and tell your own story about what it is that you're looking at. And I'm really attracted to that.
I definitely think you caught it with this. I had no idea that that was from her mugshot. Like that, there is so much expression that you were able to capture. And I'm still blown away that you do all this by hand.
This image, so the paintings from 2007, 2008, those are the first years I started painting. These are digitally screened. So this is industrial signing that I would do on a huge commercial flatbed printer that was probably 12 by 14 feet. And this ink is used to make gas station signs. It is completely archival and so durable. So these gas station signs out in the middle of the desert, the colors last for years. And so when the ink binds to plexiglass, it should look like this for a really long time. I mean, I did experiments with this ink, had paintings on the top of my roof, and they looked great after 7 years. You couldn't tell that they'd been in the sun.
That's amazing. And then it being that industrial strength kind of also lends to that ambiguity as well, in a way, I feel like. So who do we have here?
This is a portrait of Nicole Richie, and I think this is from 2007 or 2008. And this was a paparazzi photograph that I found in a magazine. And in this image, I think she's walking with another person, and there's people in the background. So I really kind of zoomed in and really focused on her, as opposed to the other people in the image. But there was just, again, the ambiguity that this offered. She could almost be anywhere. She could almost, she could be thinking about a number of things, and it could be a number of people. It doesn't necessarily get immediately attributed to her.
So for portraits are not all that you do. What you have several series of word art. Is that the right term?
I did a couple shows of text-based portraits. And again, this is a friend of mine was talking about art. He was talking about murals and graffiti. And this is a direct quote from him. He was at the studio and he's like, "Art's not a crime, yo." And I immediately said, "That's amazing, and that's got to be a painting." And so this is a portrait of him, and this is all nail enamel. The text is all nail enamel, and so the black, the shadow, is on the substrate, and the red is on the facade, and that kind of olive green color is also on the substrate, but it's on the back of the substrate.
So the red is on the front, and then the olive color is on the back of it.
Correct.
And so so you do, all of these are representative of a different people, right? So these are all portraits of in themselves, but the words and the colors themselves, kind of like the expansion paintings that we're doing right now, that we're working on, you're choosing the colors and such with the person in mind, right? So what about this one? Because to me on my screen it looks mostly just white on white, clear plexi.
Yes, exactly. This is white nail polish on a background spray painted white. And this is a portrait of an art dealer that came to the studio, and he just did not really vibe or understand what I was doing. And he said, "This is art," kind of as a question and as a statement. And I thought, that's absolutely brilliant. And that too will become a painting. So literally the next day I did this.
That's awesome. Do you remember what his name was? And not to say on here, but like,
yes,
that's great.
Unforgettable, actually.
Did you let him know that you did this one and it was inspired by him?
I didn't. I never did. But I probably should. That's probably a great idea.
I love it. And then Picture What You Will. Was this inspired on the same day, or?
This is actually inspired on a different day, and this was someone that was really insistent on having me do a commission, and wasn't really happy that I wasn't interested in doing a commission. And honestly, if it was of her, I probably would have done it. But she wanted me to do a painting of her kids, and I don't know what it is about paintings of kids for me, but it's just always freaked me out. And I think it's because kids change so much, and I don't know what it is, but I'm just not interested in doing paintings of kids. So my response to her, in this moment was like, picture what you will. Like I can give you a blank canvas, and then you can just attribute whatever you want to attribute on the canvas. But again, that was the conceptualist in me really trying to relay that. But if someone's in the studio and they're looking at formal objects and they want something on their wall, that's not satisfaction. They want something much greater than that. So
do you, we have a comment on here. Dana says, "I love that he turns a negative into something more thoughtful." And I completely agree. My question is, so, and I guess it's kind of answered already, but just to reaffirm, the word portraits are not necessarily always something that they said. It might be a phrase that you associate with them, with that person, or, okay. Wanted to.
That's right. It's, I've overheard people say things on the street, and so I'll extract that. And I heard two people, this is very LA, but I heard a conversation between two people that began and ended with, "and he's all, and she's like." And I thought, that's a no-brainer. That's being done. And I think that was one of my first text-based portraits.
That's pretty awesome. So what I know we've got several more pictures to kind of go through. So you just stop me when there's one that I personally love pink. So when you put this one in here, she's one of my favorite vocal artists. And yes, I absolutely love her. I went to her concert when she was here in Birmingham. I also do Ariel as well as her. So anyway, lots of things about me tonight, apparently. But yeah, but I absolutely love her. So I love that you threw this in here. Do you were you just inspired to do this one from like a picture from somewhere, or what's the story behind this one?
Full disclosure, I had a show, and I did a show of hummingbirds, and she bought a painting, which was awesome. And she's just a rad person. She's a great, really conscious and aware human being, and kind of doesn't operate from her ego at all. And it was really refreshing. And she's just she's really, really great. She's really sweet. And a friend of mine is good friends with her, and I said, hey, I would love to do her portrait if she's open to it. And she said, yeah, sure. I went to her house, and her hair was kind of down and in her face, and she had no makeup on, and she's like, let's do this. And I said, great. I got my camera out of my pocket, and we were standing in her doorway, and she said, do you want me with a mohawk? And I said, sure, that'd be great. That's awesome. That's like how you normally look. And so she literally went like this, put her hair up, and I snapped the picture, and that was it. So
that's amazing. If only I could make my hair like do awesome things on a moment's notice. That's pretty amazing. I'm geeking out at the moment that, like, for millions of reasons that you got to meet her. Very jealous. But okay, so what about well, as we kind of flip through this is a question I definitely want to make sure to ask. What is art like for you right now? And I know we're about to get to the expansion paintings here in a second, so I'll just kind of keep flipping through. But what does this look like for you in the time of COVID?
Well, I have been home a lot, and it's great. I go through material a lot, and so when they shut down the art store, and I was not able to get paper, getting large scale paper has been really difficult, because I'm really particular about it not being creased in any way, because when the paper's up and being framed and a light's on it, every little imperfection shows up in terms of any wrinkle in it. So I'm anxious to be able to go back to the art store and get paper. So I had some paper, and during this time I was using a lot of materials that were just at the studio or in the garage if I purchased too much of something or had leftovers. And so it's been a time of being creative in a different way for me, which is using existing materials. Nail polish that I've had a little excess of, or colored pencils that I had from a previous project. So it has spawned actually a new series of works on paper, which I'm happy to show you if you'd like to see what I'm doing.
Let me stop my screen share,
okay.
And then we will put you on. Amanda, you may have to help me with putting him on speaker view. Oh, there we go.
Great.
I apologize to everyone. The weird sounds are my pet parrot over here.
So this is what I've been up to now. And this is spray painted paper with colored pencil on top.
That is beautiful. And so what is your thought process behind these?
So, sorry guys, I'm trying to lace them out here for you. Again, these are all portraits. I'm definitely thinking about particular individuals when I do these. And the expansion paintings have kind of loosened up in a bit. In particular, you can see that here with these. And these lines are becoming quicker, a little bit more organic. And I'm using a harder edge to kind of blur some of the lines. So this was all material that I had in the garage at the time, and kind of able to utilize.
So we have a question from Jacob. Paul, you mentioned being inspired a lot lately in our conversation recently. What are some things or other artists that have been driving you?
Wow. Let me angle this up a bit. I think the idea about personal connections, and in a time like this where people have been asked to quarantine, you know, humans are such social beings and social creatures. I think these drawings in particular, you know, these works like this for me have allowed me to really think about people and experience those people in a new way. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, there we go.
So I think this time really has affected me because I miss being around people. I miss connecting with people. I miss those hugs and handshakes and all the things that remind us that we're human beings kind of came to a screeching halt for a while.
So is it like ambiguity, but in a totally different sense of the word?
I think ambiguity comes into play for sure, but I'm definitely thinking about as I'm thinking about people, I'm thinking about my spiritual and emotional connection to them, and as that happens, I'm gravitating towards color. So I'm working on, you know, a portrait like this. This is a 8.5 by, or 8x10 sheet of paper that I had laying around, and I'll spray paint a bunch of different backgrounds, and then the next day I grab them and start thinking about someone and attributing line and color to aspects of that person. So this time really has affected me because I've taken time away from a bigger painting, the portrait of trees that I'm working on, which is 12 feet wide. And that has taken me, the first one I did took me 10 months. And so this is a really nice interruption and from that bigger project. It's really refreshing.
With that, we have another question. So Lisa Monty says, thank you so much for this up-close talk about your artistic processes and portraits. When and where is your next exhibition? If it goes all according to plan.
Right. If it goes according to plan, I hope to have an exhibition in London in 2021. So that would be great. But I know that so many things have been changed. The galleries that I tend to work with, their schedules get plotted out kind of a year or two in advance, and things really got turned upside down the last few months. So it'll probably be a few months before things can get confirmed, and we'll know exactly what's happening and who's showing and where and times and everything else.
I'm going to, because we keep talking about the expansion portrait, so I am going to reshare my screen. We only have a few minutes left. So are there any other questions, you guys? And feel free to unmute or type into the chat as we kind of keep going through the slideshow here. But Paul, will you tell us, I know you've talked a little bit more, you've gone in and out of the expansion portraits, but we're on one now. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So this is a portrait of a dear friend of mine, and I actually did 2 portraits of the same subject. And again, you know, I'm picking a color that represents an idea, thought, or emotion or action about that person. And as I keep thinking about that person and different aspects of their personality, these rays kind of get shaped and laid in and colorized, and at the end, they become a portrait of that person.
So let me go to the next one. So these are also quite big as well. Are you, the tree one that you're working on now, will you be going back to, once you move from kind of one set of things to the other, do you ever revisit a series or such that that you've done before, or now that you've gone from this onto the tree, then you'll move on to something else after that, or is this something that you continue to work on?
I will probably always do these expansion paintings. This will always be a part of my practice. It's a form of expression for me that has been with me from the beginning, and the paintings themselves, I think, will evolve. They've already loosened up and kind of been broken apart, and you can see in one of the templates that I think Jacob was working on that really has turned into a floral image for me. I still consider it an expansion painting. I still consider it a portrait, but they definitely do evolve and take on new shapes. So that part's exciting for me, and I'm definitely open to having things change and evolve, and I'm definitely open to growing with the work. But the impetus of the work and the genesis of the work, I think, will always remain. It'll always be about a person. That's a new one.
Oh, this one right here?
Yeah, brand new. I just did it. Finished it last week.
Is that the one that's behind you?
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, great. Are there any last questions?
There's one from Jacob. What advice would you give an MFA student heading into their last year of grad school?
Wow. Well,
No pressure.
I have so much respect for, especially, well, I mean, your program, obviously, you know, is one of the best. But I have a lot of respect for these students that are really diligent about their practice. And my only advice is keep doing what you're doing and stay focused and stay clear and stay driven, and don't lose sight of your vision or who you are, because I think an academic environment really offers a lot of opportunity for someone to become afraid of their own vision. And it's one of the things I love about your program is that you really encourage artists to be who they are and foster who they are, as opposed to try to turn them into someone else, which I've seen in an academic environment. And so really keep doing what you're doing and stay focused.
I've heard that question so many times, and that's one of the best responses I've ever heard.
Thank you, Paul.
That was awesome. Well, we are out of time. I can't believe an hour always goes really fast. So thank you. And Paul, who's with you in the room with you?
Okay, we've got the baby in the family. She's 10. This is Blaze. And then we've got her big sister, who's also 10. They're twins, but Zella is a few minutes older.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And then make an appearance. What? Okay. We have someone shy there too. We've got Grandma Giggy, but she's very shy.
Oh. Well, I'm so glad you are all able to join us, and thank you so much, Paul, for taking time out of your day and all the days leading up to this to do this with us. And before we finally sign off, if everyone, I need to stop sharing my screen in order to do this portion, and go back to gallery view. If everyone that's been working on something, if you don't mind turning on your camera and then holding it up and showing us what you've been doing. I did not get very far with mine, but did far.
Oh my gosh, those
awesome.
are incredible.
Oh, yay. And then I'm gonna, because my screen's not big enough to fit everyone on, I'm gonna switch to the other one so that way I'll be able to get multiple screenshots. Oh, this is awesome.
Oh my gosh, will someone take screenshots of this, please?
Yes, absolutely.
These are incredible. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm blown away. All right, I have a favor. I really have a favor.
Okay.
Before everyone leaves, I would love for people to send me these things via Instagram, via text. I'm happy to give out my number to text me images. I want to post all of these. I am in love. Oh.
Well, and we want to do the same thing. So if you guys put this on Instagram or Facebook, be sure to tag us at AEIVA UAB. So it's the @ AEIVA UAB. That's our handle. And then Paul, what is your handle? And I'll put this in the chat real quick.
Okay, great. Mine is Rusconi Studios, RUSCONI Studios.
Studios with an S, correct?
Yeah.
With an S at the end.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And should I give my number out if people want to text, or do you think social media is the best way? Will that get
I think social media is the best way.
Great. Okay.
And yeah. And so yeah, guys, be sure to share it and tag both Ava and Paul in your Instagram post. And if it's on Facebook, we'll be sure to send it over to you, Paul, as well. So be sure to tag us. And thank you, guys. John, it looks like you had something to say, or no? Okay.
For the people who are recurring visitors to this event, I really encourage you to come next week. Thaddeus Mosley is one of the most important self-taught artists in the country, based out of Pittsburgh, and his exhibition that's up at Karma Gallery right now, they're going to give an exclusive gallery tour. And so I really encourage you to come back next Thursday for that. But otherwise, no, thank you.
And that series is where we're highlighting artists who are, their artwork got quarantined elsewhere.
Yeah, it's basically exhibitions that are up throughout the country that are currently on display, but don't actually have like public accessibility. So like we're giving them a platform to view those shows.
And we'll be, from here on out, we'll be flip-flopping that event that's a reoccurring event with this one. So Outside the Lines doesn't happen next week, but it will be happening again on the 21st. So thank you, everyone.
I need to say one thing. Samantha, the baby, is like stealing the show. I can't handle it.
His name is Paul.
Oh my gosh!
So
He's very taken by the bird.
Oh, she loves kids. Will you say hi?
Say bird?
Say hi.
so sweet.
It's getting near her bedtime, so she's not as talkative right now. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you guys, and we hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.